Hey sleepy koalas, welcome back to Koala Moon. I'm Abbe. Tonight we'll be joining Koko and Kira for the most soothing bedtime story collection. There's no risk of ads or wake-ups, so settle down all cozy and let's begin. Koko and Kira Go Stargazing by Luke Prendergast. Deep in the heart of a faraway forest stood a cozy wooden cabin. Inside the cabin lived a family of koalas: Koko, his parents and grandparents, and, of course, his little sister, Kira the panda. Koko and Kira went to Sleepy Forest Elementary School, where they learnt about all kinds of things like mathematics and the history of the forest, and at exactly which time of year the berries that grew on all the different trees would be at their most ripe, plump and delicious. And in the evenings, after the sun had set and the sky above the forest had gone dark as ink, sometimes Koko and Kira liked to lie on their backs on the grassy patch outside the cabin, looking up at the twinkling stars. "What do you think they are?" Kira would ask. "What do you mean?" Koko would reply, frowning a little. "They're stars." "I know they're stars, silly," Kira would reply with a giggle. "But, I mean, what they really are, what stars are." And then they'd look up at the stars contemplatively, mulling over the question, which seemed stranger and stranger once she thought about it. "Maybe they're fireflies that flew up there and got stuck," Koko proposed. "Or the eyes of some huge far-off creature," suggested Kira, "looking down at us and blinking." "Or they could be burning balls of gas, billions and billions of miles away," said Koko. But they both clutched their bellies and laughed at that. That was such a ludicrous idea. One evening, when they had finished feasting on a delicious dinner of eucalyptus pie that their mum had made them, Koko and Kira lay outside, staring up at the stars, when Koko was struck by an idea. "I know how we can find out about the stars," he said. "How?" Kira asked. "We have to go and ask Cuthbert, of course." Kira's eyes opened wide and she nodded. Cuthbert. Of course that was who they should go and ask. Cuthbert the camel was one of the oldest and wisest creatures who'd ever lived in Sleepy Forest. He had 2 humps on his back, in which, he said, he could store water for many days, and a sandy-coloured coat, and a sagging, hairy-bottomed lip that jiggled whenever he was munching on grass, which he often was. He was also, admittedly, a little bit grouchy, but that was understandable since he'd been plodding around the forest for such a long time. His feet must be pretty sore. Cuthbert's great passion was studying the skies. He called it celestial phenomena. But those kinds of long words were often pretty tricky for Koko and Kira to wrap their heads around. What he meant by celestial phenomena was the stars and planets and comets and asteroids and all the other bits and bobs that floated about up there in the great big above. You see, Cuthbert was terribly, terribly clever. His brain was like a huge castle, every room chock full of all sorts of interesting information. Once, Cuthbert had even helped Koko out when the moon had passed in front of the sun and got stuck. He'd explained to Koko that what he was seeing was a solar eclipse, but that something had gone wrong because the moon wasn't supposed to get stuck like that. And then he'd helped Koko unstick it. So Cuthbert wasn't only clever, He was a pretty considerate camel, too. What's more, Koko told Kira, was that Cuthbert must have almost finished the brand new observatory he'd been working on for some time. The structure, which he was calling the Sleepy Forest Stargazing Observatory, was being built in a large clearing in the middle of the forest. He was kitting it out with the latest high-tech telescope. "And he told me," Koko said, "that once it was done, we should go and check it out. What do you think?" "I think we should definitely go check it out," said Kira. Koko and Kira went back inside the log cabin to tell their mum that they were off to visit Cuthbert the camel. "What a wonderful idea," their mother said. "Mind if I join too?" And so the three of them went to put on their jackets, for it was a little chilly out that evening, and before long they had all set off through the twilit sleepy forest. All the other creatures were getting ready for bed. They passed birds settling down in their nests high in the branches, a family of hedgehogs plumping up the soft, dry leaves in their hollow at the foot of an oak tree, and they waved good-night to Bread and Butter, the 2 ducks who lived in the reeds on Sleepy River. The light was fading slowly, and up through the trees Kira could see that the sky was a darkening lilac colour, but she couldn't see any stars. When she voiced this concern, her mum patted her on the head. "Don't worry, Kira," she said. "The stars will come." And sure enough, as they turned around the trunk of a particularly grand sycamore and towards the clearing where Sleepy Forest Stargazing Observatory loomed up, Kira noticed that the sky was now speckled with an infinite array of sparkling stars. Even though it was brand new, the observatory looked like an old building. It was made of pale stone, with columns at the front and a big dome on top. And at the ornate front doors stood Cuthbert the camel, looking pretty proud of himself. Cuthbert lifted a hoof and waved them welcome. "Hello, Cuthbert," they said one by one, and Koko added that he thought the Sleepy Forest Stargazing Observatory looked pretty cool indeed. "Why, thank you, Koko," said Cuthbert. "It's taken me some time to build it, stone by heavy stone. But here we are. It's done. And I'm very glad that you've come for the grand unveiling with me." He lifted his head and looked seriously up at the sky. "The stars are out in their millions tonight," he said. "It will be quite some show. Are you ready? You'll be the first Sleepy Foresters to try out the new Stargazing Observatory." "Oh, yes," said Koko, and Kira said, "We can't believe how lucky we are to be the first to try it out. Thanks, Cuthbert." Koko, Kira and their mum followed Cuthbert through the great doors and into the observatory. Inside it was cool, and softly glowing lamps flickered on the walls, sending shadows dancing around the large circular room. The dome rose up over their head, and in the middle of the room was the strangest contraption Koko or Kira had ever seen. "That doesn't look like a telescope," Kira said, furrowing her eyebrows skeptically. "At least," she added, careful to make sure she was being polite, "not like the ones they showed us in the textbooks at school." "Ah," replied Cuthbert agreeably. "No, In fact, it won't look like anything you've seen anywhere, young Kira. No more putting your eye to a lens and squinting to see the stars. No, no. I have been working on this invention for some time, and it is the most newfangled, high-tech piece of machinery anyone in Sleepy Forest will ever have set their eyes upon. No more looking up at the stars through a telescope. This, my stargazing observatory, will bring the stars down to you. Cuthbert beckoned them over. Come and take a look, he said. Kira followed Koko and her mum, but she still wasn't quite convinced that this machine was high-tech or newfangled, whatever that might mean. It looked, as far as she was concerned, a bit like a ginormous bed. Yes, a bed. A big, black, rather soft-looking pad was spread out across the floor in the middle of the observatory floor, with a bunch of cushions that looked as though they were designed to rest your head on. The weird bit was that above the bed, rising all the way up to the top of the dome, were layers and layers of glass. Glass so thin that from certain angles it disappeared entirely, and you couldn't see it at all. The only high-tech part of the whole strange contraption that Kira could see were a series of buttons and levers bunched together by the side of the black pad. And yet, as she approached the invention, Kira began to notice, or rather, she began to feel, that there was something truly magical about it. There was a zone of energy around it that made a quiet excitement flood through her and flutter in her chest. The sheets of glass, it turned out, weren't just plain glass at all. Each of them, as she looked at them, had their own particular quality, swirling with colours as though pink or milky white or pale blue galaxies were caught on their surfaces. "How does it work?" Koko asked Cuthbert. "Well," said the camel, "let me show you. Everyone, lie down here, looking up towards the sky." Koko, Kira, and their mum did as they were instructed, lying on their backs so that through the sheets of glass they could see the curved dome of the observatory ceiling. Cuthbert took his place too. He asked if they were ready before pressing a button. With a creak, the dome ceiling unfurled, revealing the brilliant sky behind it. "Wow," whispered Kira. The sky above Sleepy Forest was pitch black and full of dazzling stars, like someone had tipped a jar of sprinkles over it. They burned and blinked high above them. The view was spectacular, but it was the same view that Koko and Kira gazed up at when they lay on their backs outside their little log cabin. "Hold on there 1 moment," Cuthbert said. "Are we ready for the magic?" Koko and Kira held their breaths. In their heads, they were both repeating, "Yes, we are. Yes, we are. Yes, we are." "Here we go," Cuthbert murmured, and he pulled a lever. And then something truly miraculous happened. To Koko and Kira, it no longer felt as though they were lying in the new stargazing observatory in Sleepy Forest. Instead, It felt as though they had floated up, up, up into the night sky, and were now soaring through space itself. Asteroids and meteors and comets flew past them. The blazing stars zoomed towards them. Closer and closer they came, spilling their bright light all around. And then, all of a sudden, they were there. The stars were floating all around them. "Crikey," whispered Koko. "We wondered whether the stars were fireflies stuck up on the ceiling of the sky, and we wondered if they were balls of burning gases millions of miles away. But we never imagined this." "No," Kira agreed. "Never."
"Well, well, well," said Cuthbert. "These, kids, are the constellations."
For all around them swirled creatures whose bodies were made out of stars. Koko saw a ram with curled horns go charging through the observatory, followed by a shoal of shimmering fish. A swan made out of starlight spread its silvery wings, and a crab clicked its claws together as it scuttled across the stone floor. "It really does bring the stars down to you," whispered Kira, looking around in awe.
"Why, of course," said Cuthbert gruffly, "just as I said it would. And," he added, "what's more, you can interact with them too. Go ahead, give it a go."
Kira had spotted a brilliant star-studded horse pawing the ground in the corner of the observatory. Carefully, she got up from the floor and took a few steps over to it. Her feet felt very light indeed, and with each step she floated a few feet across the room, as though she were no longer on solid earth, but walking on the moon. The horse was no normal horse, but had a pair of bright white wings sprouting out of its back. It ruffled its feathers as Kira approached. "Hello," she said. "I'm Kira, the panda bear, and who, may I ask, are you?" The winged horse gave her a toothy smile.
"I am Pegasus," he replied, "guardian of the skies. I fly around at night, flashing my stars, making sure all the world is safe."
Kira asked Pegasus if she could touch him, because she had never touched a starry constellation before.
"I can do even better than that," Pegasus replied. "Hop on. I can take you for a ride."
Kira looked around at her mum, who gave her an encouraging nod, and so, holding on firmly to Pegasus's neck, she swung herself up onto his back. Pegasus's body was warm and silky. It was the strangest feeling in the world, sitting right on top of starlight. Looking down, she could almost see the floor of the observatory through his body, but she felt safe enough.
"Ready?"
Pegasus asked. "Ready," Kira told him. Pegasus spread his huge wings, gave them a flap, and up they soared into the sky. They flew out of the open dome of the observatory and up into the dense night hanging above Sleepy Forest. Kira gripped on tight, and looked down below her at the trees waving their branches in the gentle breeze, as though they were waving hello to her. The forest stretched out for ever and ever. She had never seen her home from the sky before, and marvelled at how big and beautiful it was. Pegasus flew her high up into the sky and did a few somersaults in the air. As they sailed back down towards the observatory, Kira wondered whether any of the other creatures who lived in Sleepy Forest was looking up from their beds just then and wondering if they were seeing a falling star. "Thank you, Pegasus," Kira said once she jumped off his back. The star horse gave her a low bow, and Kira gave him a big hug of gratitude. Meanwhile, on the other side of the Stargazing Observatory, Koko had made his own starry friend. While Kira had been flying through the night sky with Pegasus, a shimmering star-spangled eagle had landed in the observatory, and in its arms it carried a strange-looking stringed instrument, like a miniature harp.
"That's Lyra," Cuthbert the camel explained to him. "The musical eagle. They say she strums her tunes for the whole universe to enjoy up there. Go ahead and say hello to her."
So Koko went up to the eagle and introduced himself. "Hi there, Koko," the eagle said. "My name's Lyra." Koko told Lyra that he liked the look of her musical instrument very much. He had his own ukulele at home, he told her, which he liked to take to Sleepy Forest Elementary School to play with his classmates. One day he'd like to be in his very own music band. "What kind of instrument is that exactly?" he asked her. "This," said the eagle, presenting the instrument with a flourish of her wing, "is called a lyre. That's how I got my name, Lyra. Get it?" Koko asked Lyra if she'd show him how to play the lyre. "Of course I can," she replied. Then she began to pluck the strings with a delicate claw and strum them with a sweeping wing. The most beautiful sound of music filled the whole observatory. It sounded to Koko like magical tinkling rain. "Here," Lyra said when she'd finished her tune. "You have a go now." "Really?" Koko asked her. "Really." With a trembling hand, Koko reached out for the lyre which the eagle held out to him. The lyre seemed to be made of pure starlight, and Koko was sure his paw would pass right through it. But it didn't. His fingers closed around the cool handle of the lyre. "Go on," Lyra the eagle encouraged him, "just like I did it." So Koko took his paw and strummed the lyre's strings once. That same melodious song swam from the vibrating strings. Now he plucked them with his claws or strummed them with his paws, and the whole observatory was filled once again with that beautiful music. "Wow," Koko said. "I've played real guitar. I've played air guitar. But I've never, ever played star guitar before." While Koko played, Kira and his mum had a little boogie around the observatory. Even Cuthbert joined in with his own shimmying dance. When he'd finished playing, Koko handed the lyre back to the eagle. "Thanks for letting me play," he said. Lyra nodded her head. "And you let me know if you ever need an extra member for that band of yours." And spreading her glittering eagle wings, she took off to the skies. The four of them lay back down on the soft black pad and looked up through the layers of misty glass. The stars were still swirling about the sky, falling down towards them. "Ah," said Cuthbert, "here come a couple of my favourites, Mama Bear and her baby cub." Just as he'd described, after a few moments, a great white bear, her thick coat shimmering with stardust, was prowling around the observatory. Around her feet played her little cub, with 2 dark stars for eyes. He jumped this way and that, bouncing onto his mother's big paws and then jumping off. At last, though, the little bear cub gave a big yawn and curled up in the corner of the observatory. His mother noticed that he'd got tired, and she gave a big yawn too. Then she went and lay beside her little star cub, so that he could nuzzle close to her warm body and fall asleep. "Oh, listen," Koko and Kira's mum whispered to Cuthbert. "The baby bear is snoring gently. It seems that even the stars have bedtimes, and it looks like it's long past that little cub's." "And it looks like it's past Koko and Kira's bedtimes too," replied Cuthbert, nodding his head towards the little koala and the little panda bear. Koko and Kira's mum turned around and was surprised to see that her 2 children were now fast asleep, curled up in Cuthbert's stargazing observatory. Their chests were rising and falling gently, the fur on their chins rippling where their sleepy breath was coming raggedly out of their noses. In his sleep, Koko rolled over and slipped a little paw into Kira's so that he could hold it. Their mother's heart was filled up by a swell of love and pride for her children. "I should get them home to bed," she whispered to Cuthbert. "But do you mind if we stay in the observatory a little longer? I enjoy watching the stars. It makes me feel very much at peace." Cuthbert, of course, said she was more than welcome to stay as long as she liked. So the 2 of them lay staring up at the stars, which swirled and swayed up above them. They saw Pegasus gliding through the atmosphere. They heard the sound of the eagle's lyre echoing through the heavens. They stared up into the great expanse of sky, while around them 4 bears slept soundly. Koko the koala, Kira the panda, and the starry mama bear and her baby cub. They stayed watching the stars until Koko's mother herself began to yawn. She said her goodnights to Cuthbert and lifted her children into her arms. Then she carried them back through the quiet forest, led back to her log cabin by the light of the stars.
Koko Helps Kira Get Back to Sleep by Luke Prendergast. Deep in the heart of a faraway forest stood a cozy wooden cabin. Inside the cabin lived a family of koalas. One evening, the whole family sat at the dinner table in their little wooden cabin, eating a delicious meal of eucalyptus stew. Kira, however, was rather fidgety. She simply couldn't keep still. She kept hopping up and down on her seat and wiggling her bum and wiggling her little toes. "What's going on with you this evening, Kira?" their mum asked her gently. "I've never seen you this restless before. Is something wrong?" "Oh, no, Mum," Kira replied. "There's nothing wrong at all. Quite the contrary. In fact, there's something very right." Her mum raised an inquisitive eyebrow, and Kira explained that the next day her year at Sleepy Forest Elementary School were going on a school trip to the other side of the forest, where there was a high ropes course. There were ladders on trees and wooden bridges in the canopies, and zip wires that brought you back down to the forest floor. "It's a panda bear's dream," she squealed, almost tipping off her chair. And it was also the reason she was so restless. She was too full up with excitement to sit still. She simply couldn't wait for tomorrow to come. Koko and Kira's mum laughed a sweet, chuckling laugh. "Well, I'm very excited for you too, Kira. But you're going to have to settle down and eat your food and get a good night's sleep. You're going to need to be well fed and well rested for all that tree climbing tomorrow." As per usual, her mother, who was a very wise koala indeed, was right. Kira did need to make sure she had plenty of energy for her school trip, so she did her best to keep her excitement under control, and she finished off every last mouthful of her eucalyptus stew. She even asked for seconds. When they had finished their dinner, Koko let out a big yawn, and because yawns can be terribly catching like that, Kira let out a big yawn too. "Wow," said Koko. "You might actually be tired, Kira. Come on, let's go and get ready for bed while you're yawning already. Hopefully you'll be able to sleep the whole night through." Koko and Kira went to their room. They changed into their pajamas. Koko wore a blue pajama shirt and some blue shorts because blue was his favourite colour, and Kira's favourite colour was purple. So she put on a big purple t-shirt and pulled the purple bow out of her hair. They went to the bathroom and brushed their teeth, making sure they brushed for a whole minute on the top and a whole minute on the bottom. They pulled faces at each other in the bathroom mirror to keep themselves occupied. All kinds of monstrous faces, until soon enough the time was up. They spat their toothpaste into the sink and wiped away the bits that had dribbled down onto their chins. When they went back through to the bedroom, their mum had already been in to pull the curtains closed. A soft, silvery moonlight peeked in through the corners of the window, and they could hear the magical whisperings of the forest trees outside. Koko and Kira climbed into their beds. Koko let out another big yawn, and so did Kira. My, said Kira. I must be tired. Night-night, Koko. Night-night, Kira, Koko replied. And with that, they turned over and fell asleep. 1 minute passed, and another minute, and another one slipped by. Outside, a breeze stirred through the trees, and Kira, poor Kira, lay wide awake in her bed. She had woken up
after only a few minutes of sleep, her stomach once again full of excitement about the following day. She turned over in her bed, first this way, then that way, trying her best to find a comfortable position that would send her straight back into the land of dreams. But try as she might, she could not. Eventually, Kira's twisting and turning roused Koko from his sleep. He turned over and looked at her across the room and said, "Oh dear, Kira, can't you sleep?" Kira let out a sigh. "Oh, I'm afraid I can't, Koko," she said. "I fell asleep for a few minutes there, but then I woke up full of excitement, and now I can't get myself back to sleep." "Well," Koko whispered, "the best thing to help you fall asleep is to concentrate on your breathing. Your breath carries the special magic of sleep on it. So if you pull it gently all the way down into your belly, it helps settle all your excitement and lets you drift off to sleep. Do you want to try it, Kira? Why don't we try some deep breathing together?" Kira said that sounded like a good idea indeed. So Koko told her to take a deep breath all the way down into the warm bottom of her tummy, and then he told her to let the breath out slowly. They breathed in, and they breathed out. You have to feel the breath go all the way down to the tips of your fingers and the tips of your toes, Kira, Koko told her. Kira did as Koko said. She took a deep breath in and felt it tingle all the way down to the tips of her fingers and the tips of her toes. Then she let it slowly out. She felt her body relax as though it were carried on a big, fluffy cushion. "Has that helped?" Koko whispered. "I definitely feel more relaxed," Kira told him. "But I haven't been able to fall asleep. What do you think I should do?" "Well, we'll have to try something different," Koko said. "Do you want to know what I do whenever I can't sleep?" "Yes, please," replied Kira. "I count sheep," he said. "Count sheep?" asked Kira. "What does that mean?" "It's a method for falling back asleep," Koko explained. "You close your eyes, and in your head you imagine sheep grazing in a beautiful grassy field. In the middle of the field is a fence, a low white fence. And one by one, the sheep run along and hop over the fence, one after another, an endless stream of sheep, and you count them as you go. The theory is that counting sheep is so monotonous that you'll fall back asleep again without even knowing it. Would you like to give it a try?" Kira said that it was certainly worth a go. "Close your eyes then," said Koko, "and do what I just said. Count the sheep." Kira closed her eyes, and just like her big brother had told her to, she pictured a beautiful green meadow with lots of sheep grazing on it. The sheep were so big and fluffy that they looked like big puffs of cloud sitting on the grass, munching away. Then she pictured a white fence in the field, and then one by one, she nudged the sheep in her imagination to start jumping the fence. First one, then two, then 3, 4, 5, and 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. She counted 20 sheep, and then 30 sheep. She counted 50 sheep, and then 100 sheep. By the time she got to 217 sheep, Kira decided that, as fun as it was, this counting sheep method was not successfully sending her off to sleep. "Koko," she whispered, "I counted 217 sheep. The field is pretty busy with sheep now, but I still can't fall asleep." "Okay," Koko replied. "Let's try something else then." He slipped out of his bed and turned on their nightlight, which was in the shape of a little pig. Then he perched on the side of Kira's bed. "Do you think a cup of hot chocolate might help you fall back to sleep?" he asked. Kira nodded. "I think it might." "Okay then," said Koko. "I'll go and make you one now. I won't be long." "Thank you, Koko," Kira said. Koko went out of their bedroom and climbed the ladder down into the lower section of their cozy little log cabin. Everyone else had gone to bed now, and the kitchen was only lit up by watery moonlight coming in through the windows. He poured some milk into a saucepan and very carefully placed the saucepan in the hot oven so that the milk could warm. When it was ready, he put on oven mitts and took the saucepan out. He poured the warm milk out into Kira's favourite mug, a purple one, of course. And then he added a few scoops of the most delicious hot chocolate powder ever, which came from Papa Praline's chocolate factory, just on the other side of Sleepy Forest. He stirred the chocolate powder into the warm milk until all the clumpy bits had dissolved and the milk had turned a lovely, thick brown colour. Koko took a deep breath in through his nose. That smelled delicious, if he did say so himself. Careful not to let any of the drink slosh and spill over the sides, Koko picked up the mug of hot chocolate and climbed back up the ladder. He went back into his bedroom and perched on the edge of Kira's bed again. "Here you go, Kira," he whispered softly. "Here's your hot chocolate." Kira sat up in her bed and took the purple mug from her brother. She gave the hot chocolate a sip. "That's delicious, Koko," she said. "Thank you very much. It's so warm and soothing in my tummy. I'm sure this will help send me back off to sleep." She took another sip of the hot chocolate. Then she said, "Hey, Koko, do you think you could sing a nighttime lullaby on your ukulele? I think that would help me to get to sleep too." "Of course I can," Koko said, because there was very little he loved doing so much as playing his ukulele. He picked it up from the side and gave it a little strum, just to check that it was in tune. He cast about the room, searching for inspiration on what lullaby to sing for Kira. His eyes drifted over their beds, across the walls, and out of the window, where he saw that the sky was now spangled with lots of little stars. That gave him just the idea. Koko strummed his ukulele and began to sing one of his favourite lullabies ever. "Twinkle,
twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. As Koko ended his lullaby, he looked at his sister and saw that her eyes were closed. Her duvet was rising and falling steadily from her breath, and a look of peaceful contentment had settled over her face. It seemed that she had fallen into a deep slumber. So Koko carried on strumming his ukulele gently, letting the spangly chords echo around their little cabin room like waves lapping on the shore, bearing Kira ever deeper into sleep. When he was sure that his sister had drifted completely off, Koko stopped his strumming. He rested his ukulele on his knee. He looked at Kira fondly. Kira opened one eye. "Oh dear, Kira," Koko sighed. "You're still not asleep?" Kira shook her head. "I loved your ukulele playing," she told him. "It was so peaceful. It made me feel all warm inside, and I felt like I was drifting away, up into the sky. And for a while, I thought I was floating up there with all the twinkly stars. But, well, I still can't sleep. I'm still too excited." Koko put his ukulele back down on the side and stroked his chin thoughtfully. He murmured. "We'll have to think of something even better then." Koko scratched his head for more ideas of what could help send his little sister off to sleep. He let his eyes ramble across the room, lit up as it was with the pink glow of the pig nightlight. His eyes drifted over the wall, over the sprigs of bamboo that grew in the corner of the cabin, and at last alighted upon the bookshelf. Koko had an idea. "Hey, Kira," he said, "how about I read you a bedtime story? Hopefully that will take your mind off your excitement and transport you to a whole other magical world. Then, hopefully, you'll be able to fall asleep." From beneath her duvet, Kira smiled and nodded. "That sounds like an excellent idea, Koko," she said. "Could you read me a story, pretty please?" So Koko got up from the edge of Kira's bed and walked over to the bookshelf. Their dad had built the shelf and fixed it upon the wall years ago, and it contained many wonderful volumes of books. There were adventure books and mystery books. There were fantasy books and books for a rainy day. But there was one particular volume that Koko knew he needed. Right at the end of the shelf stood a big, dusty book, bound in leather, with its well-used ancient pages yellowed and crisp. On the spine, in gold lettering, were written the words, "Bedtime Stories." Koko pulled the book off the shelf and carried it back across the room. He sat on the edge of Kira's bed once more and lay the book on his lap. It felt heavy. He flipped the book over, and it fell open on a story.
"Oh, Kira," Koko whispered. "This one looks like the perfect story. It isn't one we've heard before. It's called The Sleepy Star."
"The Sleepy Star," Kira repeated.
"That does sound like a good story."
She nestled down further into her duvet and nuzzled her head into the softness of her pillow.
"Let's read that one."
And so Koko began to read the words of the story, The Sleepy Star. It went like this. Once upon a time there was a star who, whenever nighttime fell, got very sleepy indeed. Now, this doesn't sound like such a bad thing to us creatures who live on the earth, who fall asleep when darkness sets in. But it was something of a problem for the star. That's because since the beginning of history, it's the star's job to be awake at night and twinkling. And then when daylight comes, that's when the stars get to close their eyes and rest. But this little star, she got tired at night. And so, when all the other stars were out twinkling and shining, she'd yawn and drift off, and her eyes would close, and then her light would go out. When this happened, the other stars would wake her up.
"Come on," they would say. "You have to stay awake. It's night time, and we need your twinkling."
And then the little star would peel open her eyes and concentrate on being awake. And that would work for a little while. But sooner or later, and it was always sooner, she would drift off back to sleep, and her light would go out. The other stars did everything they could to try to solve the problem. They took turns at prodding the little star to try to keep her awake. But that just resulted in the little star becoming tired and grouchy. No one likes to be prodded like that. They even tried telling her stories all night to keep her entertained. But the stories didn't work. The sleepy little star would just fall asleep right in the middle of them. Finally, they investigated whether she was getting enough sleep during the daytime so that she had enough energy to twinkle at night. And what they discovered was that she was often awake during the daytime when she ought to be asleep. They scratched their starry heads about this. What a topsy-turvy little star that sleepy star was. They just could not think of what to do about it. One night, while they were trying to keep the sleepy star awake, the silver moon sailed past them. The moon was renowned far and wide for being one of the wisest beings to voyage across the skies. And so, the stars told the moon about the sleepy little star's predicament. They explained that she slept at night and stayed awake in the day, which was entirely the wrong way around for a star. Could the wise moon think of any solution for their dilemma? The moon stroked his silvery chin while he contemplated the problem. It was a tricky one indeed. But the stories of the moon's wisdom were not unfounded, and soon enough he came up with a solution. "This sleepy star," he said, "clearly doesn't like to twinkle at night and sleep during the day. So instead of changing him,
Why don't we all just accept him for who he is? He's a day twinkler, not a night twinkler. So perhaps you should let him do just that." All the stars scratched their heads once again. They'd never considered just letting the sleepy star be the way the sleepy star was. That was a rather inspired idea from the moon, they agreed. Smiles began to spread across the faces of all the stars, including the sleepy star herself, who rather liked the idea of being allowed to twinkle at the time she preferred to twinkle. "That's a wonderful solution," the stars told the moon. "But there is just one problem." "And what might that problem be?" the moon asked the stars. "Well," piped up one star, "stars twinkle at night. That's what the very name star means. So if this sleepy star here isn't twinkling at night, should we still call her a star?" The moon agreed that this was a very good point indeed. "Perhaps, in that case," he suggested, "they ought to give the sleepy star a new name." "Good idea," the stars agreed, but then they frowned. "What name should we give her then?" The moon smiled at them. "Best to ask her, don't you think?" he said. And so all the other stars turned to the sleepy star, and they asked her what she would like her new name to be. The sleepy star thought about this question for a little while. Then she came up with an answer. "I think I would like to be called the sun." The stars all nodded in agreement. Sun. That was a perfect name. And so ever since then, the sun has not shone at night, but has kept the daytime sky lit bright with all of her brilliant twinkling. When Koko had finished telling the story, he closed the book. "Wasn't that a good story, Kira?" he whispered. "Kira? Kira?" Koko peered at his little sister. Kira, it seemed, had fallen asleep. What a miracle! Telling the bedtime story had worked its magic then. Koko watched her for a few moments, watched the rise and fall of her breathing, and the twitching of her little panda nose as she drifted off into her dream world. She was probably dreaming of swinging from trees, zooming down zip lines through the sleepy forest canopy. He waited a minute or two to see if she would wake up again, but she didn't. And so, very quietly indeed, so as not to disturb her, Koko slipped off the edge of her bed. He returned the book of bedtime stories to the shelf where it belonged and slid under his own bed covers. It was warm in there, so soft and cozy, just perfect for falling asleep. Koko let out a big yawn. He was very tired indeed now. All that work trying to help Kira fall asleep had really taken it out of him. He leant over and turned off the pig nightlight, and the room sank into darkness. Now there was just the silvery light of the moon slipping through the gaps in the curtains. Now there was just the tranquil noise of the crickets outside and the wind whispering through the trees and the steady grumbles of the trees. The world was entirely at peace. Koko closed his eyes. He pictured a green meadow in the evening, full of fluffy clouds of sheep. In the middle of the field there was a little fence. But before Koko could even count a single sheep jumping over it, he had fallen into a deep and profoundly peaceful sleep. Koko and Kira go to a Swiftie concert by Luke Prendergast. Deep in the heart of a faraway forest stood a cozy wooden cabin. Inside the cabin lived a family of koalas. Koko the koala lived with his mum and his dad, his grandma and his granddad. Up until recently, that had been the whole family, and he was the youngest member of it. But a few months ago, his parents had announced a truly exciting surprise. There was to be a new member joining the family, and soon enough, Kira the panda arrived, Koko's adopted little sister. Ever since then, Koko and Kira had been having a whale of a time getting to know each other. Koko introduced Kira to his two best friends, Camo the chameleon and Prickles the hedgehog, and the four of them loved hanging out and playing in Sleepy Forest together. Koko thought it was a very interesting thing indeed to gain a little sister, because you found out just how much you had in common. Both he and Kira loved blueberry muffins, for example, and they both had great fun climbing trees. And they both liked the way the tree bark in the forest smelled after a good long rain. There were other things they didn't have in common, of course. Kira's absolute favourite colour in the world was purple, for example, while Koko's was blue. And while Koko liked to get up quite early in the morning, just as the sun was peeking over the horizon, it often seemed like Kira could sleep forever. Koko was always having to go and drag her out of bed by her paws. But Koko often thought to himself that he enjoyed discovering the things he and Kira didn't have in common more than the things they did. Without Kira, for example, Koko would never have tasted bamboo pancakes, which were, it turned out, completely delicious. And he also would never have heard about Swiftie, and that would have been a real shame. Swiftie was Kira's favourite singer in the whole entire world. When Kira arrived, she brought with her a purple MP3 player, and she would listen to music on it with a pair of bright purple earphones and dance around her room. "What are you listening to on that all the time?" Koko asked her one afternoon. "Swiftie," she said simply, as though that explained it. Koko raised an eyebrow. "Who's Swiftie?" he asked. Kira stopped her dancing and took out one of her earphones. "You mean you don't know who Swiftie is?" she asked him, a look of shock on her face. Koko shook his head. "Nope." "She's only the coolest singer in the world," Kira cried. "Look!" And from under her bed, Kira pulled a rolled-up poster. She unfurled it and lay it flat on the ground. And then, as she and Koko stood looking down at it, she said, "That's Swiftie. The poster showed a golden bird with lustrous golden feathers and a big mass of curly blonde hair on her head. She was wearing a long dress with lots of sparkly sequins on it, sequins of every colour of the rainbow. And in her hand, she held a microphone. Just from one look, Koko could tell she was fabulous. "Can I have a listen to some of her music with you?" Koko asked Kira, for some reason feeling a little shy. But Kira just threw her arms around him. "Of course you can," she cried. Now, there was nothing that Koko and Kira liked doing more than putting Swiftie on the radio and dancing around the cabin together. They stuck the poster of Swiftie on the wall. They sang her songs in the shower. One evening, they even played her to their granddad, who sat in his old armchair listening for a few moments before getting up and boogieing around the room with them. "Well," he said, grooving and jiving to the music, "I have to admit, this Swiftie is pretty good." Listening to Swiftie together brought Koko and Kira closer than ever before. Koko was so glad that he had something he could bond with his little sister over, staying up late, listening to the music and singing songs together as they strolled around Sleepy Forest. They agreed that there was nothing they'd wish for more than the chance to meet Swiftie in person. "That would be a dream come true," Kira sighed. One afternoon, when Koko and Kira came home from a day of working hard at Sleepy Forest Elementary School, their granddad was waiting in the cabin for them. "Come on, you two," he said. "I've got a surprise for you." Koko and Kira exchanged a wide-eyed stare. They wondered what on earth the surprise could be. Their granddad pulled an envelope out of his pocket and handed it to them. "Open that," he said, "and see." Koko said that Kira should open it, and so she took a claw and slipped it under the seal. She tore open the paper, pulled out its contents, and gave a big squeal of delight. "It's Swiftie tickets!" she shouted, showing Koko the slips of paper in her hand. "She's coming to sing in Sleepy Forest, and the concert is tomorrow." Koko and Kira were both so overcome with joy and gratitude that they ran up to their granddad and threw their arms around him. "Thank you," they said. "Thank you, thank you." That night they were so excited that they didn't want to go to bed. They sat in their room, listening to Swiftie songs and discussing all their predictions about what would happen at the show tomorrow. Which songs would she sing? What instruments would she play? And would she do her famous concert move, spreading her big golden wings out wide and soaring through the air, swooping over the entire crowd as she sang her final number? In the end, their mum had to come into their bedroom and insist that they go to bed. She switched off the radio, tucked them both in, and gave them each a kiss on their furry foreheads. "The sooner you get to sleep," she told them, "the sooner tomorrow will come. And that means the sooner you'll get to the concert." Well, neither Koko nor Kira could argue with that. Their mum certainly was very wise. The next day they had to concentrate very hard on their lessons and try very hard not to think about the concert that evening. They did their times tables and they did their spelling tests, and they tried not to look at the clock and count down the minutes until the big event. When the bell finally rang, signalling that it was the end of the day at Sleepy Forest Elementary School, Koko and Kira practically sprinted back home. There was so much they needed to do before the concert, and the most important thing of all, of course, was deciding what to wear. Koko and Kira emptied out their wardrobes, sifting through all their clothes, trying to choose the perfect outfit. They tried all sorts of things on: shirts and dresses, skirts and scarves, top hats and bowling caps, baggy tees and cowboy boots. At last, Kira decided that she was going to wear her all-time favourite outfit, a sparkly purple dress with matching sparkly pumps, and she tied a big purple bow in her hair too. "That's perfect, Kira," Koko told her. "You definitely chose the right outfit." In the end, Koko chose a blue t-shirt for himself, covered in a pattern of flying birds. He put on his favourite pair of trainers too, and a bright blue baseball cap. "All set," he said. "How do I look?" Kira looked at her brother's outfit. "Pretty cool," she said. When they went into the kitchen, they were surprised to find that their granddad had dressed up for the concert too. He was wearing a bright golden waistcoat covered in sequins, and he wore a black top hat and a pair of shiny black shoes.
"What do you reckon, kids?" he said. "I'm pretty trendy for an old koala, aren't I?"
"Very trendy, Grandad," Koko and Kira agreed. And so, making sure that they had their tickets secured safely in their pockets, Koko, Kira, and their granddad set off across Sleepy Forest. The concert was to take place in a clearing beside Sleepy River, where a large stage had been set up especially for Swiftie's arrival. As the three of them approached it, they saw a large crowd gathering outside it. There must have been hundreds of animals there, all different kinds of creatures from across Sleepy Forest. They could see bears and tigers, birds and bumblebees. There was even a family of elephants wearing matching pink trousers. "There's so many different people here," Koko said, looking around him. "Yes," Kira agreed. "But we've all got one thing in common. We're all here to see Swiftie." Koko looked at his little sister and smiled at what she'd said. She was absolutely right. Even though everyone here was different from each other, they all had things in common too. Koko, Kira, and their granddad joined the queue of fans waiting to get into the concert, and before long, they'd reached the front. They showed their tickets to the pelican in a blue uniform, who inspected them and gave them a big, beaky smile. "Welcome to the Swiftie tour," he said. "Carry on straight forward, please." They passed through a low wooden tunnel, and when they reached the clearing for the arena, all three of them clapped their paws to their mouths. What an extraordinary sight! The clearing by the river had been completely transformed. A large stage had been set up by the water's edge, and on either side of it, two huge banners of Swiftie herself were smiling down on them, with her big blue eyes, her curly locks, her golden feathers. The stage and the trees all around it were slung with twinkling fairy lights, and there were big stacks of speakers on the stage. In front of the stage, the crowd gathered on a huge grassy area. Some were eating, some were singing, some were hopping from foot to foot in excited anticipation. Some sat on deck chairs, while others sat in circles on the grass, drinking fruit juices and eating veggie dogs wrapped up in paper.
"What a big crowd," Grandad said. "This Swiftie sure does have a lot of fans."
He glanced around the arena and saw over to the side an area where food and drink was being served.
"We better get some grub in before the main event," he said. "What do you guys think?"
Koko and Kira wholeheartedly agreed. In fact, their stomachs were already gurgling. They made their way over to the food area, stepping over picnic blankets, picking their way through other fans. Every creature they passed gave them a glowing smile and waved and said hello or asked them if they were excited for the show. They even saw one grinning giraffe dressed up as Swiftie herself, in a blonde curly wig and a spangly dress. The giraffe gave them a big friendly wave. They couldn't believe just how friendly everyone was. For a few minutes, they stood in front of the food stands, deciding what to order. Everything looked so delicious. Then Koko spotted a particular sign above a stall. "Bamboo pancakes," he called out in joy. "That's just what I want." At the same time, Kira spotted something she wanted. "Oh, yeah," she cried. "They've got eucalyptus curry." Koko and Kira looked at each other in surprise and delight. What a funny, topsy-turvy world it had become. A koala eating bamboo pancakes, while a panda bear ate eucalyptus curry. The sun was dipping low in the sky, turning all the leaves of the trees dazzling reds and browns. Just as they were finishing off their delicious dinner, there was a rumble from the speakers. The show was about to begin. Koko, Kira, and their grandad went and took up their positions and watched as the lights on the stage began to flicker and flash. Kira felt excitement fizzing around her stomach, like she'd drunk too much pop. She'd been waiting for this moment for so long. She took hold of her brother's hand and gave it a squeeze. "I'm too excited," she said. "Me too," Koko said. A single guitar chord was strummed. It echoed around the Sleepy Forest arena. Then, out of nowhere, Swiftie herself swooped onto the stage, and the crowd let out a roar of cheers and applause. Swiftie sang, Swiftie danced, Swiftie soared, and Koko and Kira and their grandad sang and danced too, bopping their hips to the music, singing the words of all the songs. She was even better than they could have imagined. The minutes flew by as she played all her best numbers, opening her golden wings wide to give the audience an air hug, and strutting and boogieing across the stage. People in the audience passed out friendship bracelets made of beads, spelling out things like, "I heart Swiftie." All too soon, Swiftie gave a toss of her tangly golden locks and said, "Thank you so much for having me, Sleepy Forest. What an amazing night it's been. And you guys, have been the audience of dreams. This is my final song. Hope you enjoy it." The audience held their breath. The piano notes played. A drum crashed. And then, much to everyone's delight, Swiftie spread her wings and took to the air. Around and around the arena she flew, singing her final song
high above the heads of the crowd, as her fans all clapped and sang. With a final flutter of her wings and a deep bow, Swiftie left the stage. "That was awesome," said Kira. "Thank you, Grandad." "It really was," Koko agreed. "I just wish it wasn't over." Their Grandad looked at them both, his eyes twinkling mischievously. "Well, it isn't quite over yet," he said. What could he possibly mean? But their Grandad only pressed a paw to his lips to indicate they shouldn't ask any questions, and gestured for them to follow him. Instead of heading in the direction of the crowd, out of the arena and back into the forest, their Grandad led them towards the stage. They walked around until they were in the backstage area. Ignoring the looks of confusion on Koko's and Kira's faces, their Grandad led them up to a golden door and gave it 2 knocks with his paw. "Are you ready?" he said, smiling down at them. And then Koko and Kira could not believe their eyes. Who should open the door but Swiftie herself? "Hello, Kira. Hello, Koko," she said. "Your Grandad told me you'd like to meet me. Thank you ever so much for coming to my show." Koko and Kira could barely speak. They were so overcome by happiness. Instead, they both gave Swiftie a big hug and thanked her for putting on such an amazing show. Swiftie gave them both a signed picture of her and another hug just for luck. And then Koko and Kira made their way, rather astonished, back across the arena. "How did you do that, Grandad?" Koko asked him. "Oh," their Grandad replied, another twinkle in his eyes. "I have my secret ways." So they made their way back across Sleepy Forest as night descended and the shadows lengthened across the floor. They spoke about the concert. What were their best moments? What did they think of all of Swiftie's costumes? Kira said her favourite song was the one about Romeo and Juliet, and Koko said that his was the one about shaking it off. "I just like the boogieing," their Grandad said. By the time they got home, Koko and Kira were rather tired. It had been a long day. Not only had they worked hard at school, but they'd spent the entire evening dancing and singing. It had all left them feeling very happy indeed, but also ready for bed. They gave their Grandad an extra big squeeze that night, thanking him again for such an extraordinary surprise, and then they went up to bed. Kira took off her purple sparkly dress and put on her soft purple pajamas. Koko put his blue baseball cap back in the drawer. They did their teeth in the bathroom sink side by side, and then they each gave a big yawn. "Come on," Koko said. "Time for bed." Their mum came in to tuck them in, as she always did. "You'll sleep well tonight," she said, and they agreed. It certainly felt like they needed a big, long sleep. Their mum gave them each a kiss on the head, and then closed the bedroom door behind her. In the darkness, the 2 siblings gave out happy, tired sighs. Koko began to hum a Swiftie tune, and for a few moments, Kira sleepily joined in. Then she turned on her side so she could see the silhouette of Koko lying on his back in his bed.
I can't believe we got to go to a Swiftie concert, she said. I know, said Koko. And we got to see her fly around the whole arena. And, Kira added, we got to meet her in person. We actually got to speak to her.
Yeah, ooh, said Koko through a yawn. I still can't quite believe it. They lay on their backs for a few more minutes, and Koko thought perhaps that Kira had fallen asleep when she started speaking again.
It really was a dream come true to meet Swiftie, she said. But do you know what's an even bigger dream come true?
What? Koko asked her.
To have got to do it with you.
When she said these words, Koko was filled with a warm and cozy feeling, as though there was a hot water bottle resting gently in his chest. He felt very lucky to have the family he had, his parents and his grandparents, and Kira too.
I love you, little sister,
he whispered.
Love you too, big bro,
came the reply. And then, just like that, Koko and Kira fell into a deep and dream-filled sleep. This is Koko and Kira Go Cheerleading by Luke Prendergast. Deep in the heart of a faraway forest stood a cozy wooden cabin. Inside the cabin lived a family of koalas. There was Koko and his little sister, Kira the panda, who had been adopted into the family almost a year ago now. And what a year it had been, the best Koko thought of his life so far. Then there were his parents and his grandparents too. They all lived very happily together in Sleepy Forest, eating eucalyptus and bamboo, a delicious panda snack that Kira had introduced them to, and hanging out in the treetops. Up there, Kira liked to teach Koko what she called tree tricks, which was basically acrobatics which you did up in the canopy. Kira was so talented at it. She could hang upside down from branches. She could swing round and round. She could walk along them on her tippy toes as though they were tight ropes. She could even somersault off one branch and land on another. Koko wasn't quite as good at tree tricks as Kira, but he was learning. Each morning, Koko and Kira walked through Sleepy Forest, between the thick, gnarly trunks of the tall trees, to Sleepy Forest Elementary School. There they learnt about all kinds of marvellous brain-bending things. They studied times tables and how to spell strange words. They learnt about the geography of Sleepy Forest and its history too. They read magical tales and learnt all about how plants use the sunshine to make food for themselves. And on the way home, Koko and Kira often had playful arguments about which teacher they liked best. Koko thought the old goose who taught science was the kindest and cleverest. But Kira's favourite was Monsieur Toad, who taught them French. But this was all before one special day, when their head teacher, Mrs. Merryfeathers, a kindly barn owl, gathered them in the playground to introduce them to a new teacher. I'd like you all to put your paws or your feathers or your hooves or indeed your trotters together, she said, and give a big welcome to Miss Bushytail, our new cheerleading coach." Koko and Kira and all the other students did just as Mrs. Merryfeather said. They clapped and applauded and gave out a few whoops and hollers as the new teacher, Miss Bushytail, stepped up beside the head teacher.
"Wow,"
whispered Kira into Koko's ear.
"that's the coolest teacher I've ever seen."
Koko had to agree. Miss Bushytail was a squirrel with a thick and glossy red fur coat and big bright eyes. She was smiling at all of them and waving, her white teeth sparkling like polished riverbed stones. She wore a dark green sports cap on her head and a matching dark green tennis skirt. And in one of her paws she carried what appeared to be a big fluffy ball in the same dark green colour.
"What's that?"
whispered Koko.
"That's a pom-pom,"
Kira explained.
"You use them when you do cheerleading."
Koko was about to ask his little sister what exactly cheerleading was. But before he could, Miss Bushytail's voice rang out over the playground, bright and clear as a bell.
"Hello, everybody! Thank you for that super diddly-ocious welcome. It's really made me feel all warm and bubbly inside. I'm Miss Bushytail, and I've come to start a new cheerleading squad right here at Sleepy Forest Elementary School. The cheerleading team will be called the Fierce Spirits, because though our forest might be sleepy by name and sleepy by nature, deep inside all of our chests, our hearts burn brightly."
And with these words, Miss Bushytail threw her hand up and shook her pom-pom in the air. It flickered and shimmered and mesmerized Koko so much that he was disappointed when she lowered her hand again.
"Fierce Spirits,"
he whispered to Kira.
"What a cool name."
Miss Bushytail, meanwhile, had carried on speaking.
"Cheerleading is not only a way for us to show support for all the other teams around us, like Sleepy Forest Soccer Team or the Chess Champions or the River Rapids Swimming Team. It's also a pretty thrilling sport in its own right. We dance, we move, we get thrown through the air, we somersault, we backflip, and we stand on our heads. Being a cheerleader is all about being a part of a big team, like a part in a well-oiled flying machine. Only by working together can we soar."
Miss Bushytail gave a shake of her big fluffy squirrel tail. The playground was silent. Every single person was enraptured by the new teacher.
"Tryouts,"
Miss Bushytail said by way of conclusion,
"will be tomorrow. I hope anyone who has even a glimmer of interest comes and gives it a go. You never know. You might find something that takes your breath away."
On the way home from school that afternoon, Koko and Kira couldn't stop talking about just how cool Miss Bushytail was.
"Did you see her sparkly teeth? And her trendy skirt? Did you hear how she said, 'super diddly-ocious'? And how she made her pom-pom shake and shiver as though it was alive, like she'd captured a handful of ocean waves in her hand and made them dance. It was practically magical. "We have to try out for the cheerleading team," Kira said. Koko nodded. "We certainly do. I hope I'm going to be good at it." "You will," Kira said, putting her arm around him and giving him a squeeze. "I just know it." But at the tryouts the next day, which took place in the playground, it was Kira who shone the brightest. Miss Bushytail had marked out a grid in chalk on the floor and had set up a series of carefully placed tree branches at various heights. Kira executed every instruction Miss Bushytail gave her with precision and panache. She backflipped and twisted her way across the grid, somersaulting off the branches and landing at just the right points, never stumbling, and never, not once, losing the big grin on her face. "Bravo! Bravo, Kira!" Miss Bushytail cried when Kira was done. Miss Bushytail wasn't the only one standing up and clapping. Kira, blushing a little and rather out of breath, gave a little shy bow and tottered off the playground. Koko gave her a big high five. "Nice one, sis," he said. "Those were some super impressive tricks." "Thanks, Koko," Kira said to him. "Now it's your turn. Go smash it." But where Kira had spun and twirled through the air like a bird in flight, Koko's tryout was rather less graceful. Sure, he showed off many of the tree tricks Kira had taught him, but he never quite managed to land in the right spot, or when he did, he almost stumbled and fell. Even though people were clapping and cheering him on, he felt heavy and clunky and was a little disappointed when his tryout was over. "Don't be down, Koko," Kira whispered, giving her big brother a squeeze. "You did amazingly well." Koko gave her a smile. Kira's words definitely made him feel better, but by the time he got home again, he felt a little sad again and took himself off to bed early. "What's the matter with Koko?" their mum asked Kira. "He doesn't think he's going to make it onto Miss Bushytail's cheerleading squad," Kira told her. "Oh dear," their mum said, tucking a chair under the table. "Poor Koko." And yet, the next day, much to Koko's delight and surprise, when Miss Bushytail stuck a piece of paper to a tree with the words "Fierce Spirits" written at the top, his name was on the list. His mouth fell open so far his jaw almost hit the floor. "I made it onto the squad," he murmured. Kira threw her arms around him. "I told you that you would. Nice one, Koko." Koko could feel his body filling up with fizzy, bubbly glee. He had made it. He had made it onto the Fierce Spirits. And yet, as they made their way to their first cheerleading practice, the question still bounced around his brain. He had made it, but how? As Koko watched Kira and some of the other creatures warm up, jumping and pirouetting and flapping around with extraordinary elegance, that question simply wouldn't go away. So he sidled up to where Miss Bushytail stood and asked her outright. "Miss Bushytail," he said, "I can't do all the tricks that Kira and the others are doing there. So how did I make it onto the cheerleading squad?" "Oh, Koko," she said, turning her bright eyes and bushy tail towards him. "You should have more confidence in yourself. You were very good at tryouts, and I saw something very special in you indeed." Koko felt his heart brighten. Miss Bushytail had seen something special in him. "What did you see, Miss Bushytail?" he asked. She touched him on the top of his head and gave him a twinkly smile. "A fierce spirit," she said. Then she clapped her paws together and called out for everyone to gather round. Kira and the others stopped their cartwheeling quickly and gathered in a circle. Everyone was looking at Miss Bushytail intently. The way she could capture their total attention had to be a kind of enchantment. "Welcome, everyone," she said, "to your first cheer squad training. Like I was just telling Koko here, each and every one of you are here because of how fiercely your spirit burns. Just like the spirits of all the creatures who live here in Sleepy Forest. Now," Miss Bushytail turned a kindly smile on Koko. "I hope Koko doesn't mind me telling you, but he was just saying to me that he's not sure that he's talented enough on the squad. Now, I want you all to do me a favor. Raise your hand if you've had similar worries." At first, all of the new students glanced around nervously. Then, first one, and then another person raised their hands. Soon enough, everyone had raised their hands, even including Kira. "Look around you, everybody," Miss Bushytail instructed them. "Now you can see. Everyone, from time to time, has worries that they're just not good enough, that other people around them might be better at something. Whether that's cheerleading or mathematics or painting or climbing trees. And that's okay. Worries are a little part of the complex, wonderful creatures that we are. But here's a fact. Every single one of you is good enough for anything you put your heart's desire to. Do you promise me you'll never forget that?" A chorus of "We promise" rang out. "Good," said Miss Bushytail, nodding her head once and shaking her dark green pom-pom in the air for emphasis. "And what's more," she went on, "different people are suited for different things. Kira, for example, can soar through the air like a bird. And Camo the chameleon, well, I've seen how flexible you are. You can wrap yourself up into a tiny ball, which means you're going to be great at tumbling. And Koko's ears pricked up. He couldn't wait to hear what Miss Bushytail thought he'd be good at. Koko, you are strong and stable. You are going to make an excellent bass." "A bass?" asked Koko. "What's a bass?" "Oh," said Miss Bushytail in a hushed and secretive whisper, as though she was conspiring just with him. "A bass is one of the most important parts of the cheerleading team. The bass throws the flyers into the air and catches them safely when they land. The bass provides the energy and the safety net. Without the bass, the whole squad would fall apart. And you, Koko, will be one of our basses." Koko felt his cheeks almost hurting from smiling so much. A bass! He liked the sound of that. "So," said Miss Bushytail, clapping her paws together. "Let's get to it. Time for practice. Our first show is in just a couple of weeks." After that, cheerleading practice, which they did almost every evening after school, turned out to be everyone's daily highlight. They learned how to tumble, starting with roly-polies, but soon enough practicing somersaults and backflips and corkscrews and twists. It was true that some of the other squad members, particularly Kira, had a natural gift for flying through the air. They twisted and tumbled and flipped and flopped, and then, just when everyone watching had their hearts thumping in their mouths, they landed perfectly on their feet, smiling brightly. Camo was particularly brilliant. He was such a contortionist. He could wrap himself up into a little ball, then twist himself into a star shape, and then curl himself over backwards, all while he was floating through the air. He also changed colour, pink, red, green, orange, blue as he did it, which always made the rest of the squad whoop and cheer. And as it turned out, Miss Bushytail was right. Koko was perfectly suited to the role of bass. He turned his paws into a little step and, with a heave, pulled Kira or one of the other flyers up onto his shoulders. There he stood, balancing carefully, while they made all kinds of shapes or shook their pom-poms in the air above him. Immediately, Koko understood what Miss Bushytail had meant. One misstep from him, and the whole pyramid of people standing above him and the other bases would come tumbling down. He was like the foundation of a complex cabin built by a master craftsman. His part in it might not be visible or flashy or instantly impressive, but it was crucial. On the night before their first show, Miss Bushytail unveiled a big cardboard box. "What's in there?" asked Kira, rubbing her nose curiously. "Well, take a look," Miss Bushytail said. Kira ambled over to the box, lifted the flaps on top and peered in. Then she gave out a squeal of excitement. "It's our outfits!" she cried. Kira started pulling pieces of clothing out of the box and handing them around. Everyone knew which pieces were theirs because they had chosen their favourite colours. Miss Bushytail said there was no team colour because every fierce spirit was an individual, and each cheerleader should wear the colours that suited them best. Obviously, Kira was decked out all in purple. A swooshy purple skirt and purple plimsolls and bright purple pom-poms. Koko's cheerleading kit was blue, with trainers that had bolts of white lightning shooting down them. Camo the chameleon had a special cheerleading outfit which changed colour as he did. Everyone thought it was super cool. That evening, Koko and Kira went to bed full of excitement about their first show the next day. They'd invited the whole family, their parents and their grandparents too. "I can't wait for them to see it," said Kira. "I'm so excited I can barely sleep." "I know," Koko agreed, "but we've got to sleep. We need to be refreshed and energized for the performance tomorrow." Kira knew that Koko was right. He so often said very wise things. And so they said goodnight to each other and fell into deep sleeps which were full of soaring cheer moves and shimmering pom-poms. And the next morning, their mum waved them out of the door saying, "We'll be waving in the audience. Break a leg." "I certainly hope no one actually breaks a leg," Koko whispered to Kira, which made her press her paw to her mouth and giggle. The beginning of the day went slowly. Each time Koko looked at the clock, it seemed to have only been a minute since the last time he checked. But then, once they'd had lunch, time seemed to speed up, and suddenly it was time for the show without him even realizing it. The Fierce Spirit Cheerleading Squad met in the changing rooms in their multicolored cheerleading kit. They could hear the rustling and muttering and low-toned conversation of the audience, who were all seated in rows of seats in front of the makeshift stage that had been set up in the playground. The noise was exciting and a teensy bit nerve-wracking, which Miss Bushytail picked up on straight away. "A little bit of nerves are a good thing," she said. "They make sure we keep trying for our best. But you guys, I have to say, are the most natural bunch of cheerleaders I've ever come across. You're going to smash it. I just know it." And she gave them such a dazzling smile that they all felt very reassured. "Come on," Koko said. "Team hug." And they all formed a circle with their arms around each other. "Fierce spirits, let's go," they chanted. And the chant made each and every one of them feel like a little flame had been lit in their chests. They were ready. It was time to perform. And perform they certainly did. Koko couldn't believe how well it went. From the very moment they stood in formation on the stage, looking out at the sea of smiling faces before them, everything went exactly according to plan. Kira flew more gracefully than she'd ever flown before. Koko balanced more steadfastly than in any of the practices. And Camo the chameleon even threw in an extra spontaneous contortion as he tumbled across the stage. With each dazzling move, the audience broke into applause. And at the end, the members of the Fierce Spirit Cheerleading Squad stood hand in hand on the stage, bowing once, twice, 3 times. The audience got to their feet, and the sound of their clapping was like hundreds of rain droplets falling heavily on the forest leaves. Kira squeezed Koko's hand, and he squeezed hers back. Out among the clapping, elated audience, they could see the proud and happy faces of their parents, and their grandparents too. How wonderful that feeling was. It was a mixture of satisfaction that they'd managed to pull the whole routine off, and a deep gratitude that they had such a wonderful family to support them. How full their hearts felt, as if they might burst. "We did it! We did it!" they whispered to each other as they went off stage. And Miss Bushytail was there to meet them, spreading her arms wide for a big team hug. "That was super diddly ocious," she told them. Koko and Kira found their parents and grandparents, who gave them big, warm, fuzzy hugs all round. Then they walked back home, ambling their way between the tall trees, with the purple light of twilight falling in through the rustling leaves. And gradually, as their footsteps measured the passing of time, fading to darkness. All the way home, Koko and Kira's parents and grandparents couldn't stop talking about the show. "And when you tossed her up in the air," they'd say. "And when you did that backflip. And then when you threw your pom-poms up and made them spin and twirl." "It truly was a magnificent show," their mum said, touching them both gently on the head. By the time they got back home to their little log cabin, Koko and Kira were very tired indeed. What a long day it had been. What a long month, in fact, with all of the cheer practice they'd been doing. They could feel it in all their limbs. Their bodies were tired, but their hearts and souls felt satisfied. Kira let out a huge yawn. "Bedtime for you two," their mum said. And so they went upstairs, changed into their pajamas, brushed their teeth, and crawled into bed. It was so cozy in bed. They stretched their weary limbs and pulled the blankets up to their chins. Koko could already tell he was going to have a wonderful sleep. He could feel it in the relaxation of his bones, in the way he could feel his eyes closing heavily. He could feel every muscle in his body giving way to sleep. Then, through the darkness and silence of their shared bedroom, he heard Kira saying, "Wasn't that an amazing day, Koko? One of the best ever." And even though he was falling asleep, Koko smiled. "Oh yes," he said. "It was super diddly ocious." And with that, Koko and his little sister Kira closed their eyes and took a deep breath. They could hear the quiet whispering of the wind through the leaves outside, and the pale silver moonlight passed through the cabin windows and fell gently upon the wooden floors. Everything was utterly peaceful. So peaceful that they barely noticed when they fell asleep and spent the night dreaming deeply about sleepy forest creatures flying as if by magic through the air. Koko and Kira open a new venue on Sleepy River, especially for their brand new friends. Close your eyes. It's time to begin Koko Cabana by Luke Prendergast. Deep in the heart of a faraway forest stood a cozy wooden cabin. Inside the cabin lived a family of koalas. Koko lived with his whole family, his mum and dad, his grandma and grandpa, and his little sister, Kira the panda. Kira hadn't always lived there. She'd arrived over a year ago from somewhere outside of Sleepy Forest when Koko's parents adopted her, and now Kira called Sleepy Forest home. It had taken a while to settle in, but she absolutely loved it there, and she loved her family of koalas too. Neither Koko nor Kira could imagine life without the other. One morning at Sleepy Forest Elementary School, their teacher, Mrs. Merryfeathers, fluttered her big, soft owl wings and said she had an announcement to make. "Listen up, everybody. Settle down now, settle down. I have someone I want to introduce to you all. Today, we have 2 new students joining us. They are joining us in Sleepy Forest from another forest far away, on the other side of the world, the Amazon rainforest. Everybody, this is Paloma and Maya. They're sisters, and they're golden lion monkeys." Straight away, Koko could see why these monkeys were called golden lion monkeys. The student standing next to Mrs. Merryfeathers was very small, and the one next to her was even smaller. They had a little black face and a mass of the most luxuriously golden-coloured hair you could ever imagine. It was as though, Koko thought, someone had flown up to the sky and bottled some of the sun, then used it to paint the monkey's fur. That's how brilliantly golden they shone. "Hola," said Maya, and "Hola," said Paloma, a little shyly. "That's how we say hello in the Amazon rainforest," Paloma explained. "It's nice to meet you all." "Welcome, Paloma and Maya," all of the students of Sleepy Forest Elementary called back to them, and they all gave them smiles and little waves. Mrs. Merryfeathers said that they should take a seat next to Koko, who, she said, was very friendly indeed. So Koko scooched up along the desk to make room for the little monkeys. "Welcome to Sleepy Forest, you two," Koko whispered to them, as Maya took out her clear pencil case and unzipped it, and Paloma took out her pink one. "You're going to love it here, you'll see. It's such a cosy, peaceful place, and just the right amount of adventure sprinkled here and there. And there are lots and lots of folks to be friends with, like me. I can be your first Sleepy Forest friend." Paloma gave him a big, toothy grin and said she was very happy indeed to have made her first friend. Her sister giggled and agreed. And after that, Koko and the little monkeys spent the whole day chatting, but only when Mrs. Merryfeathers said they were allowed to be chatting, of course. Koko told the girls lots of stories about all the creatures who lived in Sleepy Forest and the adventures they'd been on. He told them about Buck the Beaver, who built beautiful dams, and about Hamper the Hare, who found a magical food basket, and about the time Swiftie herself came and put on a concert down by Sleepy River, and how he and Kira had got to go with their grandpa. In turn, Koko listened to the monkey's story and learned a lot about them too. He learned about the Amazon rainforest and about how it was so warm and wet that a thick mist often hung between the dark, dripping leaves of the jungle trees. Sometimes it got so hot they all went down to the cabana by the river to have a little party or, in Portuguese, a festa and a swim. "What's a cabana?" Koko asked. "It's like a little beach hut," Maya explained, "where you can hang out and listen to music and paddle in the water." "Uh-huh," said Koko, nodding. Now he understood. Paloma explained to him that their family had moved to Sleepy Forest because their dad had decided he'd like a bit of a slower pace of life, thank you very much. And he also learned that weekend it was Maya's birthday. "This weekend?" Koko asked, glancing up from colouring in a picture of a helicopter. Maya nodded, her tufts of golden hair swishing from side to side. "Cool," Koko said. "And what are you going to do to celebrate?" "Oh," said Maya, a little sheepishly. "Nothing, I guess. After all, I only just got here. I think I'll probably just hang out with Paloma and our parents." Koko nodded and smiled. "That sounds nice," he said, and turned back to colouring in his helicopter. But later, as he and Kira were walking back home through the broad forest tree trunks after school, Koko turned to her. "Hey, Kira, you know the new kids who arrived today, Paloma and Maya?" "Oh, yes," said Kira. "They seem super cool. I can't wait to make better friends with them." "They are pretty cool," Koko agreed. "One thing I found out today is that it's Maya's birthday this weekend. But because they're new here and don't know anyone, they're just going to spend it at home. But I was thinking that maybe we could throw a surprise celebration so that they feel truly welcomed in Sleepy Forest and Maya gets to celebrate her birthday properly. What do you think?" Kira was nodding so energetically, Koko thought her head might fall off. "Oh, Koko," she cried. "I think that's just the most brilliant idea ever. I remember when I first arrived in Sleepy Forest and didn't know anyone. You and your friends made me feel so welcome. Well, that's what I'm hoping we can do for Maya and Paloma too, Koko said. Except, he added, I don't really know what kind of party to throw. Kira sighed, stroking her fluffy chin thoughtfully and taking a few more steps through the trees. She was trying to cast her mind back to exactly how she'd felt when she first arrived in Sleepy Forest. I think that when you first arrive somewhere, you're missing the place you came from at the same time as you're excited about being in a new place. Those two feelings exist simultaneously. So I think that the best thing you can do is to have a celebration that combines the place they came from with the place they've come to. Something that brings the Amazon to Sleepy Forest kind of thing. You mean, said Koko, recalling what the girls had told him earlier. You mean we should throw a Brazilian festa in a cabana down by the river? Kira's eyebrows shot up with surprise. She was impressed. Well, she said, I guess that's exactly what I mean. And so the plan was fixed. They would throw their new friends a festa in a cabana down by the river. But first of all, they needed to find a cabana. They asked around all the residents of the forest, but as it turned out, there wasn't a single cabana around. So instead, they went to Buck the Beaver, who was famous for being able to build anything you could imagine using just a pile of wood and his pair of sharp front teeth. Buck was sitting on his dam on the river, wearing his usual red plaid shirt and fluffy earmuffs. When Buck saw Koko and Kira come a-knocking, he gave them a wave and said, What can I do for you two today, then? Koko and Kira explained that they needed a cabana so that they could throw a festa for their new friends, Paloma and Maya. It needed to have 3 sides and a straw roof, and a deck where they could put sun loungers and a table covered in glasses of fresh juice. Did Buck think this was something he could do? Well, Koko and Kira, said Buck, there ain't nothing I had trouble making yet. Leave it to me. I'll get your cabana built for you. Happy that the cabana building was in Buck's safe and capable hands, next Koko and Kira turned their attentions towards the question of activities. For a waterside festa, you needed all sorts of fun things to do on the water, like rubber rings and inflatable toys, and a little dinghy for floating up and down. But where were they going to find those? Then Kira had a little brainwave. I know just where we can go, she said. Pickle the Frog's Home Sweet Home Hotel. They've got a swimming pool for the guests down there, don't they? I'm sure if they have a swimming pool, they'll have all kinds of toys and paraphernalia for the water. What a good idea, Kira, Koko exclaimed. Let's go and visit Pickle and ask. So Koko and Kira made their way through the forest to where Pickle's brand new hotel stood. They went up to the door and knocked, and soon enough heard the croak of Pickle's voice from within. Come in. In the hotel lobby, it was fresh and cool. Staircases led up to the top floors and down into the caves below the hotel. And right in the middle was Pickles, wearing a smart suit and a bow tie, and standing behind the reception desk. Oh, hello, Koko. Hello, Kira, he said. Well, this is a rather delightful surprise. You see, I was expecting guests, But you live so close by, I don't suppose you're looking for a room in the Home Sweet Home Hotel today, are you? Sadly, not today, Mr. Pickle, Kira said. In fact, today we come with a favour to ask you. Ah, said Pickle. A favour? Well, then go ahead. Koko and Kira explained to Pickle that they were throwing a festa in a cabana down by the river for the Golden Lion Monkey sisters. Pickle took all this information in with a look of befuddlement on his face. But once he'd got it all worked out in his head, he nodded as a signal for them to carry on. And so they explained that they didn't have any water equipment, inflatables, a dinghy, that kind of thing, to use at the festa. They knew that the Home Sweet Home Hotel had a swimming pool, and they wondered if Pickle had any swimming pool paraphernalia that they could borrow, pretty please. Pickle looked first at Koko, and then at Kira. Now, you two, he said, do you have any idea why the Home Sweet Home Hotel is called the Home Sweet Home Hotel? Koko and Kira exchanged a look. They certainly did know why the hotel had the name it had. Pickle told anyone and everyone any chance he got. But they also knew they had to feign ignorance. Nothing gave Pickle more joy than telling this little tale. And Koko and Kira needed him as full of joy as possible. The happier Pickle was, they figured, the more likely he was to let them borrow his swimming pool equipment. Oh, I think I did know once, said Kira, in the sweetest voice she could possibly muster. But I seem to have utterly forgotten. Could you please remind us? Gladly, said Pickle, and he cleared his throat. The Home Sweet Home Hotel is called the Home Sweet Home Hotel, he told them, because it was my greatest dream to provide for any visitors to Sleepy Forest whencesoever they may come, a place of rest and relaxation. It is easy to miss home when you are far away, and here we meet each and every guest's needs in whatever way we can. We want, in the end, the Home Sweet Home Hotel to feel, in fact, like a home away from home. That is why the Home Sweet Home Hotel has its name. And that is also why, he concluded, smiling down at them both, it would be my absolute pleasure to make young Maya and Paloma feel as at home as possible here in Sleepy Forest. So, to the pool. Follow me. Pickle the Frog hopped outside to the swimming pool, with Koko and Kira following closely. He went up to the pool house, threw open the doors, and spread his arms wide. Will these do? He asked. Inside were a whole selection of inflatables, a blow-up flamingo, a blow-up unicorn, a whole load of floating noodles, some rubber rings, and a dinghy too. It was absolutely perfect. Very good, said Pickle, smiling with satisfaction. I'll make sure to bring all of this down to the cabana at the weekend, in time for the festa. You can depend on me. Koko and Kira thanked Pickle profusely and headed back out into the forest. That, they agreed, was almost everything sorted. They'd organised a cabana, and they'd organised plenty of fun water activities for the festa, too. Now, said Kira, the only thing we need to sort out is having plenty of delicious nibbles and drinks so that everyone's tummies are completely satisfied. But, she added, wrinkling her nose, who can we ask to help us with that? Koko raised his eyebrows at her. Well, Kira, just ask yourself the question. Who's the best cook in the whole of Sleepy Forest? Kira looked at him, then broke into a big smile. Mama, she said. Oh, of course I'll make all sorts of delicious treats for your festa, Koko and Kira's mum said when they'd got back to their cosy little cabin in the woods. I think we need fruit juices with little umbrellas in them, chopped up mangoes, and lemon and lime ice cream cake. Wouldn't you agree? Leave it with me. And so, that evening, Koko and Kira went to bed tired and satisfied. They'd managed to get everything in order for the festa. They'd sent out the word to all of their friends at Sleepy Forest Elementary School. Now, all they had to do was wait for the day to arrive. And when the day did arrive, they were amazed to see it was one of the most beautiful days Sleepy Forest had seen so far that year, with the sun burning brightly in the great expanse of blue sky, and a gentle breeze blowing through the leaves. It was just the kind of day, Koko and Kira agreed, made for a festa in a cabana down by the water. And so they ate their breakfast, put on their favourite party gear, and headed down to Sleepy River with their mum, carrying with them the trays of goodies she'd been preparing. When they got there, they couldn't believe their eyes. Buck was there already with the cabana already set up, an amazing little building that met their specification perfectly. A pretty wooden deck with bright yellow sun loungers on it, and parasols too, with a straw roof on top. And Pickle had been down too, for by the bank of Sleepy River were all the inflatables, and moored to the edge, bobbing on the water, was the dinghy. Oh, they both cried, hugging Buck the Beaver. It's perfect! Soon all the other guests arrived in their swimming costumes. Camo the chameleon in his magical trunks that changed colour as much as he did, and Prickles the hedgehog with a costume designed not to get caught on his spikes. Then there was a whispering. Maya and Paloma were arriving, people were saying. Shh, said Koko. Let's make it a surprise. And so they waited in silence, listening to the crunching footsteps get closer and closer and closer, until, from around the bend, the two little monkeys appeared. Surprise! They cried, and Maya, near enough, jumped right out of her ball of bright golden fur. Paloma, on the other hand, burst out into giggles. Wow! Maya said, looking at the cabana and the inflatables. I had no idea. She looked at Paloma and her parents, who stood either side of them. Was this your idea? She asked them. Her mother shook her head. Oh no, nothing to do with us, she said. This is all Koko and Kira's doing. Paloma grinned. I'm as surprised as you, she said. The girls looked over at Koko and Kira and beamed at them. Maya was holding back and grinning a little shyly, but when Paloma gave her a little nudge with her elbow, her shyness disappeared. The two monkeys ran over to Koko and Kira and gave them each a big hug, one by one. Oh, thank you, Koko, Maya said. Oh, thank you, Kira. This is the best surprise ever. Paloma agreed, then leant in and whispered in Koko's ear. Thank you for doing this for my sister. Well, guys, Koko said, this is what Sleepy Forest is all about. Having a seriously good time. Happy birthday, Maya. For the rest of the afternoon, they had the best Cabana Festa in the history of Cabana Festa. Some of the Sleepy Forest elementary students had brought their musical instruments, so struck up some jolly music. They threw the inflatables into the river, and Maya and Paloma showed them how in the Amazon they would lie on the inflatables and float up and down the river, and sometimes even push each other off. But that was okay because the water was so cool and refreshing in the heat of the day. It was a pleasure to dive right into it. Then Maya said, "Hey, do you want to know what the most fun thing is that we do in the Amazon?" "Yes, please," they replied. And so Maya found a particularly thick and long piece of vine on the forest floor and climbed up one of the big trees that stretched over the river. She found a perfect branch, then tied the vine to it. "Watch," she shouted from high above. "We swing." And with that, she took the end of the vine and leapt off the tree trunk. Down she plummeted. Then up she soared. Then, taking a few perfect somersaults in the air, she dove straight down into the water, making barely the smallest of splashes. Paloma wasn't far behind her, swinging with a whoop and doing a perfect dive into the water. "Ooh!" everyone watching cried. Then there was a chorus of, "Oh me, my turn!" And the Sleepy Forest Elementary School students formed an orderly queue by the tree trunks, and one by one soared and dove into the water on the makeshift swing. When they began to get tired, Koko and Kira's mum had it covered. "Snack time," she called out, and they scurried over to the tables where she had laid out the magnificent feast. They sipped on long glasses of fruit juice with little umbrellas poking out of the tops. They wolfed down big slices of lemon and lime ice cream cake, and they chewed on sweet chunks of mango and pineapple, letting the juice dribble down their chins and licking it back up. Then, once they were full, they paddled the dinghy up and down the river and lay about on the sun loungers, sipping the water straight out of coconuts, which Buck the Beaver bored holes into. The sun was setting now. It sent a deep orange light across the pink sky and down through the trees of Sleepy Forest. The shadows got long, and the creatures playing the musical instrument changed their tunes. No longer was there jolly, uplifting music. Now they played gentle lullaby tunes. One by one, all of the guests began to yawn. What a long and exciting day it had been. But it was time to go home. "Happy birthday, Maya," each of the guests said. "What an awesome party." Everyone agreed that this wouldn't be the last time they had a Cabana Festa down by the Sleepy River. "Definitely," said Maya. "The cabana isn't for one day only. The cabana is for the whole year round." Paloma added, "And this isn't any old cabana. This is a very special cabana." He looked at Koko and gave him a big smile. "It's the cabana of our best Sleepy Forest friend. It's the Koko Cabana." Soon enough, the girls were falling asleep too, so their parents took them home, back to the tall tree where their treehouse was. Koko, Kira, and their mum packed up the remainder of the food and made their way back through the forest. Darkness was setting in. The birds were singing their evening song. Koko let out a big yawn. Then Kira caught it too, and after a moment, even their mum was yawning. Koko and Kira's mum let out a little giggle. Wow, that was a very fun day indeed, and rather tiring too, wouldn't you agree? For a reply, Koko and Kira both just yawned again. Well, exactly, their mum said, with another little laugh. Let's get you two home. I'm so terribly proud of you, welcoming those lovely monkeys to Sleepy Forest like that. It really does make my heart swell up with happiness to have two such kind kids as you. So, let's get you home, and I'll make you both a nice cup of hot chocolate, and then we can all go to bed. And so, the three of them made their wandering way through the forest, back to the little cabin in the woods, and to their beds. Now we're floating into a deep and peaceful sleep. Feel how your muscles are relaxing. Your arms are heavy and your legs are too, as they loosen and release any tension remaining from the day. Feel how you let your body fall into the cozy warmth of your bed. Close your eyes. Let your eyelids be heavy. Breathe deeply. Breathe in and out. Breathe in and out as you continue to breathe deeply, and as you keep feeling how your body becomes soft and heavy with sleep. Let your mind drift away. That is the wonderful secret about sleep. While your body rests, lying heavily in your bed, your mind is set free, like a bird taking flight from a branch and flying up and up and up into the air. Feel how your mind loosens now, like a balloon that has been untied from a fence, and floats up and up and up like a bird. Up and up and up it floats towards the sky until it reaches up into the clouds. Imagine that you have risen up high above the world and your head has poked up through the clouds. Then spread out all around you in the silvery moonlight, white fluffy clouds that look like cotton wool or marshmallows. They look so soft and squishy. You can lie back on them and roll around in them. Try it now. Lie back in the soft cradle of the clouds. Feel how they swirl and wrap around your body, holding you gently in the world of sleep. Clouds come in all shapes and sizes. Some are big and fluffy, some are slender wisps. Some look like puffy mushrooms, and others look like paintbrush strokes that have been left on the dark sky. Let your body relax. Let your mind relax too. Let your mind float off into sleep. You are peaceful. You are safe. You are being held in the cozy warmth of sleep. With your eyes closed, let your mind